This is another video based on PowerPoint slides developed by Russell James III, along with some material at the end on the availability heuristic from Thaler and Sunstein's book Nudge. Essentially what Dr. James is doing here is with his ABC is saying that appealing eventually beats rational, i.e. your emotions or your hunger or something else overcomes what you know you ought to do. So in effect, you're not as rationally in control as you might think you are. He is using the dual self model of consumer choice, the idea that there's a long-term patient planner versus an impartial spectator, and an impartial spectator is deliberative and in a cold state. Short-term impulsive doer, passionate, effective, visceral in a hot state, i.e. impassioned in some way. In effect, the elephant understands certain emotions and drives. The rider on the elephant is the one who has the long-term patient planner and so on. So you see the emotions over here on the right as you face the screen. These are the things that lead to short-term impulsive decisions, passionate decisions, and so on. In effect, here's what you get. Long-term patient, the donuts will taste good, but they're fried in oil or high in sugar, anyone who's been in a long meeting with donuts sitting in front of them knows that eventually someone, perhaps them, eats the donuts. That's kind of the way it works. So one of the things that you can do in terms of managing yourself on things like this is change the environment. If you're afraid that you'll eat the entire bag of Oreos, don't bring Oreos home. So the rider is going to succeed, but only part of the time. If you got the donuts sitting on the table, there's a good chance you will eat them. Eventually, if the rider becomes tired, then the elephant's going to win. And if the elephant's really hungry or really whatever, the elephant's going to win. We discussed this briefly in class, but this is a summary of some research. They had a group memorize a 2-digit number, and they were interrupted in a walk back walking to another place to tell somebody the number. They're interrupted by someone offering them either fruit or cake. With a 2-digit number, people chose the cake 41% of the time, i.e. the majority of the time they picked the fruit. The group with the 7-digit number chose cake 63% of the time. That's because their brains were full, in effect. The rational part of them was done. If you give people a memory task, they'll eat more cookies. If you're sitting there studying and you're distracted and you have the food next to you, you will eat it. The fact that all these things are so available is one of the reasons we have some of the problems indicated in this particular slide. These are some experiments conducted on the subject of alcohol. And part of it is it's available. Drinking alcohol and alcohol-related problems can be affected by restriction of hours and days of alcohol purchase and by the numbers and types of alcohol outlets. There have been some places that have, some states, for example, that used to have nothing but state-owned alcohol stores for alcoholic beverages. Well, most of that has changed, but keep in mind, Florida used to have drive-up windows where you could purchase alcohol. It's one of those things that makes you shake your head, but Floridians drank more then. Let's look at drugs and physicians. One of the things you would expect based on the availability effect is that physicians, although rationally, go back to the elephant and rider, physicians know what the effects of drugs are. You would expect that they would avoid them, and yet their greater knowledge about drugs, physicians are more likely to use opiates, benzodiazepine, than other people of their age, of the same age. Male physicians in Sweden more than twice as likely to be using tranquilizers as non-physicians. They have access to their prescription pad. They can write their own. So the more available something is, the more likely it is to be consumed. Obviously, there's a marketing implication here, and that is if you want your product to sell a lot, you need to make sure it's available to the people you want to buy it. This is from the old Scarface movie, and you can see that it did not end well. This slide describes the experiment pretty thoroughly. In one case, you have one unlimited bottle of water and 5 unlimited bottles of sugar water. And in the other case, you have 5 unlimited bottles of water and 1 unlimited bottle of sugar water. And of course, mice. The longer it went in, the more water was consumed, and more sugar water was consumed. There's more available. So, in effect, with Group B, where you had access to more sugar water, you got, well, fat rats. Same thing with alcohol. Pretty much the same experiment, pretty much the same results. Oddly, mice are apparently bigger drunks than rats. Not something I knew before I first saw this. The large package, the large plate, the large bowl, the large everything, those all increase consumption of food products. If you actually want to go on a diet, the most effective way to do it is use smaller plates, i.e. instead of 12-inch plates, use 10-inch plates. And you'll see here yet another experiment related to popcorn. The group of the larger buckets consumed more popcorn. It was bad popcorn. The group of large buckets ate more, regardless. Here's the bad popcorn. Yep. And this is one of my favorites. They had an unlimited soup bowl. They didn't know it, but they ate 73% more soup than eating from normal bowls, but thought they ate only 4.8 calories more. That is, our perceptions are not aligned with reality. And again, this is the one about the plates. I got a little ahead of that one. If you eat on smaller plates, you eat less. Food availability while watching television. Well, you can see the comparison of all these weight loss techniques. Don't eat with the TV on, and use 10-inch plates for dinner. Those were effective. Eating oatmeal for breakfast or brushing your teeth instead of snacking didn't work at all. Another of my favorites, partly because the MBA students are involved here. Half are directed to a buffet table with 2 1-gallon bowls of Chex Mix, the other to a buffet table with 4 half-gallon bowls. And keep in mind that the MBA students knew exactly what we're talking about here. The 2 1-gallon bowls, people ate more. Bigger the container, the more gets consumed. When they asked afterwards, they didn't think they'd done that. So, you watch TV, I'll eat. The size of this bowl has nothing to do with how much we should eat. There's the rational part. You can find those links if you would like to. But at any rate, the summary on this is availability beats cognition, even when you know that that's the case. So, understand the circumstances in which you're making a decision. If you're surrounded by chocolate bars all the time, don't be surprised if, when you count it up, you eat a lot of chocolate. So choose your environment. And we'll talk about some of these other things a little bit later. A couple of practical suggestions. And a few additional notes related to Chapter 1 of Nudge from Thaler and Sunstein on the availability heuristic. People assess the likelihood of risks by asking how readily examples come to mind. That is, we think hurricanes are riskier because hurricanes come to mind when we're on the coast of Florida. Hurricanes might not seem very risky to somebody who lives in Minnesota, because people in Minnesota aren't thinking about hurricanes that much. The risk of terrorism is considered much higher than the risk of sunbathing. Yet, guess what's more of a problem? One of Sunstein and Thaler's points, people tend to think that more people die of homicides than suicide, but that's not true. There are 30,000 gun deaths in the United States every year, roughly, and about 10,000 of those are murders and 20,000 of them are suicides. The asthma attacks are 20 times more numerous. Deaths from asthma attacks are more numerous than deaths from earthquakes and tornadoes. False estimation of probabilities weakens our ability to prepare for risks. Governments are more likely to allocate resources to risks that people are afraid of. And unscrupulous politicians may vividly emphasize certain risks to get the electorate to have exaggerated views of those risks. Business advertisement may take advantage of the same kinds of thing. Keep that in mind with respect to what is going on with the coronavirus itself, with what's going on right now. Check your sources. Rely particularly on medical experts, not politicians. The medical experts are much more likely to give you the correct information than are the politicians. At any rate, stay well.